forced us to see all of the power dynamics that we weren't paying attention to in society. It forced us to engage a lot more meaningfully and deeply and seriously around the deeply seated structural socioeconomic inequalities that exist and persist and keep on being worse off in our societies. And so actually out of that came the journey that started with a request coming from LGBTI sex workers actually ended up being our own learning, for everybody. And so that leads us to be now today part of a new coalition that is truly a testament to the work of everyone in ESWA, starting from Luca and Sabrina, who have been coming to Brussels for many, many years, trying to get many of us together in the same room. And the fruit of your hard labor is this coalition that you're launching today, the European Coalition on Sex Workers' Rights and Inclusion, bringing 15 organizations. We're very, very happy to be part of that coalition, and it's actually quite extraordinary that it's happened in such a short space in time. As Sabrina said, carry the message that it is a message of an issue of life and death for people. Thank you.
Okay, Evelyn, thank you very much, and we forgive you for leaving us now. I'm very pleased that we have just been joined by Minister van Quickenborne, and I suggest that you give him the same roaring applause that you gave him in his absence. Okay, so I suggest, I apologize. Is it okay? Yeah, we go back to the original schedule. So I'm not going to say much more, and I'll just invite the Minister to address us for as long as you need.
Thank you. Thank you, Sophie. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for having me here today. It's a very special occasion. I would also like to thank the members of European Parliament here present today that are active in the battle. Of course, you also, Sophie, as President for today. Members also of the European Sex Workers Alliance, representatives, you, of course, PhDs, academics. First of all, of course, welcome to Brussels, the heart of Belgium, the heart of Europe, but also Belgium, the first European country to decriminalize sex work. Well, thank you. I applaud this initiative to gather all sex workers right in any form or another. No matter the cultural or societal norms, it is and it has always been a certainty. Wherever there are people living together, there are people to choose to be sex worker, and there are people looking for the services they offer. What is almost always a certainty around the world as well, unfortunately, is the hypocrisy with which it is often treated. At best, it's tolerated but frowned upon, existing in a legal gray zone. At worst, governments actively pursue people engaging in what is a natural phenomenon between consenting adults. Until recently, my country, Belgium, was not an exception to that rule. Over 27,000 sex workers are active in Belgium. And in Belgium, it was quietly tolerated, swept under the rug in seedy shippers' quarters, hidden behind the facades of shadowy bars. giving the impression to sex workers and their clients that it is something to be ashamed about, not talked about, leaving sex workers on their own to deal with the very real threats of abuse, of exploitation and discrimination, not protected by the law. On the contrary. When I took office as Minister of Justice of Belgium 2 years ago, I wanted justice to be faster, more humane, and more effective. And that is the approach we took in legislating sex work. Allow me to explain. The first principle is faster, which you can take quite literally. We've decriminalized sex work since last June, and it wasn't a moment too soon. The COVID-19 crisis had highlighted once again the difficulties faced by sex workers who have been left without an income, without unemployment benefits or a social safety net, something which other professions all did receive. With the introduction of the new sexual criminal law in our country, when effective from the 1st of June, sex work was removed from the penal code. And I'm proud to say that the oldest job in the world, as the cliché has it, is now the newest protected profession in Belgium. I want to thank Sophie, the Belgian sex workers advocacy group, for working with us on that. It was thanks to their advice that we did not choose to legalize sex work, but to decriminalize it. Because decriminalization ensures that self-employed sex workers just fall under normal labor laws. Legalization does not work in our view because it requires specific rules and regulations for a sector. And contrary as it may seem, experiences in other countries have shown that this results in too many sex workers that remain in illegality, because these rules create extra barriers. Legalization, how well intended it may be in different countries, starts off on the wrong foot. It is telling sex workers that they are outside of the law, but if they comply with a certain set of rules, they can then enjoy the protection of our law. Decriminalization, however, turns that paradigm around. Sex workers always enjoy the full protection of the law. It is those that abuse and exploit sex workers that are outside of the law. That brings me to the second guiding principle. Justice should be more humane. We've taken the job of sex workers out of illegality and given them equal social rights like all other working people in our country. We give them the recognition they always deserved. This is the only humane approach. Since the removal of sex work from the penal codes, sex workers in our country can finally enter into legal contracts with a bank, with an accountant, with a driver, with a lawyer, with a landlord. Because under the old criminal law, these people I mentioned were formally at risk of being prosecuted because they facilitated sex work and profited from it. Today, sex workers are protected. They can offer sexual services on a self-employed basis. The law also states that sex workers are allowed to enter into an employment contract. However, due to the nature of Belgian labor laws, this means that a social statute for sex workers as employees needs to be developed, just as it is necessary for every other profession. What I want is transparency and the same rights for sex workers as every other employee in our country and in Europe. A decent wage, a cap on the numbers of hours worked in a week, a syndicate, the right to strike, maternity leave, and much, much more. These are all things that every other employee in Belgium takes for granted, but does not yet exist for sex workers. This falls under the authority of my two colleagues, the Minister of Work, Pierre-Yves Dermagne of the Socialist Party, and the Minister for the Self-Employed, David Clare for the French-speaking Liberal Party. And they both have my full support in realizing this. At the end of this month, our cabinets will meet again for that. Of course, with your pressure and your speed, this should be allowed as soon as possible. Of course, I look forward to hearing your recommendation on the social statute for sex workers. That is important for me. And then the third principle, a justice that is faster, a justice that is more humane. And third principle is a justice that is more effective. 80% of sex workers in Belgium do so by their own free choice. 80%. 80%. But we must not forget that some women, and sometimes men, are forced into sex work. Think of victims of human trafficking or minors. That is why the new penal code clearly states that abuse and exploitation of sex work, underage sex work, and forced sex work are criminal offenses. Luckily, decriminalization makes our laws more effective in pursuing the people who take advantage of sex workers. Removing the gray area leaves behind a more black and white distinction. And criminal offenses like abuse, human trafficking, and prostitution of minors are much easier to detect, and empowers victims or witnesses to report these crimes. That is what we've witnessed in New Zealand, because they decriminalized sex workers. They had the courage to go to the police, and the police today in New Zealand are partners of sex workers. That is it. More detectives to the federal judicial police in our country, especially for that purpose. We've given extra funds to the 3 centers that help and shelter victims of sex work abuse. Because the gray zone is what criminals thrive in. And by recognizing and respecting sex workers who choose this profession as free adults, we can go after the criminals that exploit sex workers. Ladies and gentlemen, let me be very clear. Every country in Europe should decriminalize sex work. Yes. In every country in Europe and every country in the world, there are thousands upon thousands of sex workers. Laws that put them at risk. Laws that make them feel ashamed of who they choose to be. They have no place in a civilized society. Sex workers are people with perfectly normal and fulfilling jobs. They deserve equal protection everywhere. Let's spread that message around the world, starting with the European Union. That is why this European Parliament is perhaps the most appropriate setting. I hereby ask all MEPs present here today to firmly support this cause, so that the European Union can be a place where sex workers can stand tall, can be proud of who they are without having to fear prosecution and enjoying the full protection of the law. I am certain that this day will come, and you can count on me for making sure that they come sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think the applause says it all. I think the Belgian approach is exemplary in every way. I'm also very pleased to see that this whole process has been done in very close consultation with the people concerned, because this is one of the things that always bugs me. That when you're talking about sex workers, people are talking about sex workers, and I always say, why don't we talk with them? People can say what it is that they need, that they want. They can make their views known, as Sabrina has done very eloquently before. And you also mentioned hypocrisy. In particular, in these days, it's unpalatable that the same people who think that sex work should be criminalized are the people who think it's okay to do business with a war criminal in the Kremlin.
Yeah.
If there's real criminal, which of the two is really immoral? Okay, well, thank you very much for this.
I have to go to Belgian Parliament now.
You have to go to the Belgian Parliament. Okay, but I think we forgive you, because your contribution has been massive, and I think you can count on us. And let's be real. There is still a long road ahead of us, also in the European Parliament. But if I see today's event and I compare it to the very first time many years ago when we organized something around this theme, when we had a very small crowd, a small group of people, and we got a lot of criticism, things are changing. And I think you have proven that it can change. Belgium is leading the way, and we are going to do our utmost to make sure that
That's good,
other parts of Europe will follow.
Are there any plans for European members? A resolution on the table to ask for decriminalization of sex work in Europe?
Well, there are plans for a resolution, and if it's up to us, then it will call for decriminalization. But we'll work very, very hard to get a majority, but it's going to be a hotly disputed topic, I'm sure.
Yes. Don't you think that there could be a majority in European Parliament for this cause? No?
If you ask today, but we are going to talk to every single one of our colleagues and try and convince them. Because, as I said, we started a long time ago, and then the topic was taboo. Now we have a room full of people. We have 4 different parliamentary groups represented here. The time will come, and we'll do it as quickly as we can.
Well, anyway, when Belgium will be the president of the European Council in beginning of 2024, I, as a Minister of Justice, plan to put it on the table of an informal council.
Wow.
For the first time. I will ask my colleagues, and there are 27 in total, all of them, of all European countries, to come forward and to speak clear and loud what they think about it. Because I'm convinced that when you have a personal talk to them, many of them, not all of them, but many of them will applaud this initiative. I'm sure of that. So let's start this movement out of European Parliament and to convince all European countries to change and to do what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, this is all very energizing. Yes. Okay, Kali, I'm sorry I took I changed the program, but now the floor is yours.
Oh yes, tell me. Yes. Thank you. Good afternoon. Oh, wait, is this on? Can you hear me? Yeah? Oh, sorry. Does this one work better? No. Hello? Yeah? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sudhra, and I'm one of the co-founders of OTRAS and a board member at ESWA. Today, I wanted to address some of the main issues that sex workers are currently confronting and the dangers as harsher laws are being enacted against us and our work. Specifically, I would like to speak about current legislation. There is an estimate in Spain that there are some 350,000 sex workers, and 80% of them are migrants. This is nearly impossible to estimate, as many migrant sex workers without papers aren't openly out about their work for fear of repercussions of possible detention or deportation. When talking about sex work in Spain, we must also address the issue of migration. Foreign laws that make people illegal present migrants with few options for resources or access to stable work with papers. We could then say that because of immigration laws, more migrants choose sex work and other forms of domestic work because there are simply no other viable options. Why then are we not having conversations about abolishing these harsh and discriminatory immigration laws? Why not? And why are we not talking about abolishing borders? We are already seeing the effects of the prohibitionist movement. This law, the CSC, or the Sexual Freedom Law, has already found its first attack on sex workers in Spain by making it illegal to advertise for us to advertise our work. The Sexual Freedom Law focuses on consent. It says that consensual sex has to include an enthusiastic yes, which at first glance sounds positive. But this law assumes that sex workers cannot consent to services, therefore deeming our work as sexual violence and rape. We have no bodily autonomy under this law. We have no right to say yes or no, because under this law, everything is considered rape, even if there's consensual exchange of sex and money between adults. I want to know why then is this issue considered feminist? If people who do sex work have zero autonomy, but people who do not do sex work are respected when they say yes or no? Why is their bodily autonomy respected and ours is not? We are treated less because of our choice to work in this industry. This is the opposite of the premise of the so-called feminist Spanish government. Every person, regardless of their work, should be able to have the liberty to decide what happens to their bodies. I can personally attest as a sex worker, consent is one of the bases of all of our work. We are well versed with consent through each interaction and negotiation that we make. Under the prohibitionist law, there is a push to abolish pornography, as we have seen in the United States with Sesta and Fosta, which has created an impact on all sex workers around the world. What we have learned from this is that we need to work in collaboration with sex workers to create safer environments online and in real life, and to not further punish sex workers. We do not want to hide in the shadows during our work, which only leads to dangerous and precarious situations for us all. We want full decriminalization of all of our jobs. Criminalizing sex work in any form will not make sex work go away. It will not reduce the demand. The only people that it's going to hurt is sex workers. It is going to put us in danger if they pass this law. It will put us in precarious situations and increase poverty. If these laws are passed, sex workers will have to turn to street-based sex work or rely on third parties. We saw the repercussions of Sesta and Fosta in the States, and we know from these cases this means more violence towards sex workers. If there's no possibility to work independently, this will increase trafficking cases, as sex workers will have to rely on third parties to find clients and be exposed to exploitation. So I stand here today and ask you, especially the MEPs, to consider the criminalization of sex work is detrimental and extremely dangerous for us as sex workers. It has been internationally recognized by the World Health Organization and many other institutions that sex work-led organizations are best equipped to reach out for the most marginalized sex workers by providing HIV services, health services, legal support, and access to justice. This is why it's crucial that there is funding and support for sex worker-led organization. So in conclusion, what I want for you to understand is it is vital to listen to sex workers right now. when we are talking about harmful laws that are being proposed and passed. Under this law, it wouldn't matter if I was raped, because under this law, as a sex worker, I'm already considered a raped woman. I am not a victim. I want rights, and I want access to real justice. I want you to know that criminalization will only further lead to violence towards us, further marginalizing sex workers living in precarity and increasing stigma. On a personal note, I'd like to say that I'm standing here today in memory of my close and beloved friend who passed away this summer because of the stigma of being a sex worker. When sex workers say that stigma kills, we are really telling the truth. Lastly, it's absolutely essential that we fund and support and advocate for sex worker-led organizations, because sex workers are the future and will be key to advancing the rest of society's rights.
Thank you very, very much for your words, for being here, and for the work that you're doing. Now I'm going to give the floor to my colleagues. I will start with Cyrus Engerer from S&D Malta.
Thank you, Sophie. And I'd like to, first of all, thank Sabrina, thank Kali, thank Luca and all the others for the fantastic meetings that we have been having during the past weeks and months on this specific topic. And I want to thank all of you who are here today, because honestly, I've been fed up of going to meetings on sex workers behind closed doors with only middle-aged men discussing
middle-aged white men.
Middle-aged white men, straight white men, discussing sex workers, and that is not on. And this is why I'm so happy to be here with you here today, seeing many of you here in our European Parliament, because this is the European Parliament of all citizens, being here, speaking your minds out, telling us what you need as workers in our society. So thank you very much, and I'm so happy to see this vibrant and very vibrant audience, but not only an audience, participants here today. I can see from up here, we can see your joy, but we can also see your tears. And I think that that is something that we really need more of here in the European Parliament, in all of our political groups, so that all politicians can listen to what your needs are. Now I'll go back to my original speech, and I think that this Parliament has spoken so many times about the exchange of money for sexual services, but it has seldom listened, as I have just said, to the voices of our sex workers here in the European Union. When they themselves try to speak about this topic, they are just shut down. So to actually be able to sit here today with all of you and be able to have an exchange of views between policymakers and sex workers is a breath of fresh air, and I hope that this is just the beginning and not the end. These rooms across Parliament have become accustomed to discussions on human trafficking, on forced prostitution, and violence against women. And this is indeed a good thing if we aim to tackle the exploitation of human beings. But the topic we are speaking about today is not that. Today we are speaking about sex work, a form of work that is undertaken by people who are taking autonomous, free decisions about their body, their careers, and the way that they want to shape their lives. And there is no one better suited to speak about us as decision makers about the topic that sex workers themselves speaking to us, which is very important. I hail from the smallest EU member state, Malta, where we are having currently a very open and frank discussion on sex work. We are discussing proposals at different levels on the decriminalization of what we previously referred to as solicitation, including regulation relating to massage parlors, the so-called gentlemen's clubs. But let me be clear. Our conversation on sex work is ongoing with different and diverse sides to the argument being put on the table. However, what has been made very clear in my country, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic, is the need to move away from the ideas that we have in our head about what sex work might be. Sex work is not just that woman on the street who offers penetration for money. Sex work is a full-blown industry which is diverse in its nature. Sexuality is diverse and sexual expression is very vast. Thus, it is only natural to realize and to state that sex work itself is as diverse and as vast and must be treated as such in our laws. As decision makers, we really need to recognize this. Yes, sex work can indeed be the exchange of money for sexual penetration, but sex work is also intimacy coaching. It is also OnlyFans. It is paid per conversation, phone operations, certain forms of modeling, and so much more. It can be a click of a button, the touch of a hand, or a word at the end of someone's lips. But the world of sex work is clearly much bigger than what our laws expect it to be. And as decision makers and as policy makers, our efforts in this regard must reflect this, and most importantly, this is the thinking that must lead us. The coming months will be a testing time for sex work and sex workers across Europe. The Parliament is set to negotiate and adopt different reports which somehow relate to sex work, human trafficking, and domestic violence in the coming months. And we really know that there are many forces across the political divide in this House that would like to marginalize sex workers' voices. But we must not allow this to happen. We cannot close our eyes to the realities of today. Indeed, human trafficking and forced work or exploitation do exist, not only in sex work, but in so many other fields. And we must definitely tackle these topics, but we must do so separately from the concept of sex work. At the most, in parallel, but not together. And this will be my call in the coming months to this Parliament and even to my political group, who I know are often on the forefront countering this debate over here, as we have also heard from Sabrina today. From Kali today. I have never shied away from having controversial opinions, and I will not shy away now, not even in my group, as it is those controversial opinions which have led to some of the most progressive changes in my country, in Europe, and across the globe. But I don't want to take too much time, so I will quickly conclude that the bottom line of this discussion is what we need to make policies which reflect the developing world of sex work, a world which is characterized by ever-growing digitalization, and the best way to ensure this reflection, in my view, is through the removal of the criminalization of sex work. This is where we must start, at the very minimum. I personally believe that we should also be moving beyond this, and that we need to be looking into legal models which would also allow sex workers to obtain the same rights as all other workers in our society, all the rights that everyone is afforded in our societies. But the road ahead will be hard. We cannot pretend that it will not be, as Sophie said earlier on, but I am really filled with a lot of hope today, seeing all of you here, and the realization that the belief in sex workers' rights is alive even in this European Parliament today. And I think that we need to keep on believing together, united in our own diversity, we'll be able to turn the tide on perspectives on sex work. Thank you so much for being here today.
Okay. Monika, Vana, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Sophie Int'l and the European Sex Worker Alliance, and all of you for being here today. I'm honest, I feel totally inspired and totally in a very good and positive mood. That's not really what I expected, but I'm so happy to have this here in this house. Someone mentioned already we have very, very tough times, and you have very, very tough times. We know that. And being here with all that strength, with all that spirit, and having the possibility in this house to talk, at least in this issue, to people who know what they are talking about, who have the experience, who are affected, and to fight for positive and human solutions. You have the solutions, the NGOs on the grounds, and you as affected people, you have the experience on this issue. Thank you for being here and backing us in our fight for sex workers' rights and for human rights. because we always have to keep in mind, because some people also in this house say, oh, this is a minor issue, what are you talking about? No, it isn't. Sex workers' rights are human rights, are women's rights, are LGBTIQ rights, are a question of simply justice and of labor rights. And this is what we, in a common spirit here on this panel, are until now of the opinion. But to be honest, it's not won in this House. It will be a hard fight on this House. And Sarah already mentioned that we are working on several files, on several reports, opinions, where we have to find formulations. And one report is coming up now to be voted early next year, and it's called on prostitution. I prefer to say sex work, but the report will have the name Prostitution and Cross-Border Implications of Prostitutions. I will be the Greens' EFA shadow, and to be honest, in the negotiations about this report, of course they start already unless we don't have even a real timetable now. It's everything on the table. It's on the table that prostitution may be named as gender-based violence. I'm totally against. That's nonsense. That's absolutely unhuman. But it's on the table in this House. We had already some votes on some amendments calling prostitution gender-based violence. And it got a majority in this House. Of course, we fight against, and we hope that this will not get through in the upcoming reports. But let's be honest, we have it on the table. Also, it was already mentioned, sex work issues are always mixed up, or not always, many, many times in discussions, mixed up with trafficking, with sexual exploitation, with gender-based violence, with forcement into prostitution. These are completely different issues. This is violence, and these are criminal offenses, as the minister said very openly. And of course, we condemn this deeply. But we already have laws on that. And before we make some more criminalization anywhere, we have to implement those laws and go against those who are the criminals in these laws, the traffickers and so on. And this is what we are fighting here in this House, and for decriminalization, for labor rights, and for full protection of the law. We will be on your side. Maybe just a short remarks on Austria, because I'm also here as an Austrian politician, and you made some remarks on Malta. Is anyone here from Austria? Maybe interesting. Okay, so you know better than me. I just make some short remarks about the regulation. Because in Austria, prostitution is legal, but it's regulated, and we have 9 different regional laws, very, very complicated, very, very complex and inhomogeneous. Sex service providers are regarded mostly as self-employed, not as labor workers. They are not allowed to be official sex workers with all the labor rights. I think that's wrong. I was a local councillor in Vienna, by the way, for many, many years, tackling with this issue, and we prevented, I think it's 15 years ago, we succeeded to prevent the Swedish model to be implemented in Vienna. And until now, also the Austrian government, the minister is not here still, but he mentioned the council. And I think this is a wonderful idea, because I know that the Austrian government at the moment is on the side of decriminalizations, on the side of the sex workers, on the side of making or having prostitution legal, and for work more against exploitation and against stigmatization. Still, we have one very, very discriminatory law in Austria, and this is a 6 weeks health examination that sex workers have to go through. I think that's awful. I think we have to get rid of that, because in no other country we find that law, and we and also the Austrian Greens will work, of course, for that, because my experience from a local councillor, and I was a local councillor many, many years, and it's a long time ago, and I'm really for centuries now in this issue. My deep personal experience is, if we want to protect sex workers from violence, we must first and foremost enforce legally guaranteed rights and improve also a low threshold access to knowledge, to information, to health services, and only the lack of sufficient protection, what is the other way around, leads to exploitation and social stigmatization. And we need also in this house a discourse without taboos and moral index fingers. Morality has nothing to do here when we talk about rights and labor rights. And we have to fight for a constant exchange of member states. I was very happy to hear the minister today that he pushes or wants to push in the council. We have to fight for a constant exchange on member state level on that, and of course on European level, together with you, together with the organizations who have the experience. And by the way, congratulations for launching European Coalition on Sex Workers' Rights and Inclusion. That's wonderful. Congratulations to you. It's a big step forward, and it helps us very much in this house, and you're backing us, and thank you really for that. I feel totally inspired, and I think we can work together in a positive way in the next month on these reports. Especially, we will try to create and guarantee an open discourse. You can rely on me. I'm honest, I think almost all parties in this house are split on this issue. We know that, we don't hide that, and we will have to fight, and we will fight. Thank you for being here.
Okay, Clare Daly, please.
I have to say it's very difficult and unfair that I have to be the one to follow up from all of the great speakers that went before me. But I have to say too that I was expecting the mood in the chamber, because any gathering that I come to where sex workers are assembled, it's always with a great degree of flamboyance, energy, and a good bit of what we call crack in Ireland. So we need you to harness that energy going forward. But look, I think the title, Turning the Tide, is a brilliant one. And you can smell it in the air. The tide is changing, and the Belgian example is a key motive force, I think, behind that, because 6 or 7 years ago the tide was behind the Nordic Swedish model, and we were told that the criminalisation of the purchase of sex was going to protect women, it was going to end trafficking, and anybody who said otherwise was a heretic, a hater of women. And that was the climate in which the legislation was sadly passed in Ireland in 2017, where we introduced the Swedish model, not only criminalising the purchase of sex, but also criminalising brothel keeping and living on the earnings of prostitution, both of which were already in the law, but the penalties were massively increased, both financially and in terms of a 12-month custodial sentence. And the debate was viciously polarised. And sadly, we had no chance of a rational debate like we're having now, which is essentially a debate about safety at work. And that to me was criminal, but it led to the climate where I was only one of only 6 members of the Irish Parliament who voted against that Swedish model. But 5 years on, the evidence of what has happened is actually going to be a good motivator in how the tide will be turned. And it'll be an example to use in Spain and in other countries as to why you shouldn't do that, because all of the warnings have come true. It's been shown to be deeply harmful. It's been absolutely useless in terms of reducing demand, and it's been driven by the false and unhelpful narratives that conflate sex work with human trafficking and all the moral panic that comes from that. And critically, it's based on flawed evidence, because the legislation that was brought in Ireland was primarily brought in by a report in 2009 by the Immigrant Council of Ireland, unfortunately, in collaboration with the Women's Health Project, a project run by the Irish Health Services Executive, but with the Ruhama charity, which sounds innocuous. But this was actually funded by the Religious Sisters of Charity, a Catholic organisation. And this report concluded that 97% of sex workers in Ireland were migrant women, therefore they were all trafficked. And all the politicians that get in and one up and the other would say it, this is a fact, 97% of blah, blah, blah. But there was no evidence for that. And the Department of Justice recently said to Amnesty there was no evidence of that. And that was the basis of the law in Ireland, that it was going to deal with trafficking. And do you know what? Since it's been brought in Ireland, Ireland's position on the capacity to deal with trafficking has fallen on the international index. We've gone from tier 1 to tier 2. So the proof of that is very much in what has happened next. And sadly, they had the evidence there in front of them. They chose to ignore it. And it became a bit of a moral crusade. And like the other instances, sex workers were completely excluded from it, patronised, and that's still the case. You know, so much for nothing about us without us, and all of those great feminist slogans didn't seem to matter in that scenario. But sadly, this situation continues to this day. Sex workers are still being ignored from the debate, and the evidence is still being disregarded from the debate, because it might be of benefit of you to know as well that the government in Northern Ireland, who also have the Swedish model, have done a research report into how it has worked in the years in which it's been in. And they, the government themselves, have said that it has had a minimal effect on the demand for sexual services. It's contributed to a climate whereby sex workers feel further marginalised and stigmatised. And it's also said, due to the absence of any evidence that demand has decreased, we're not really able to determine whether it has or not. So what's the conclusion? Well, sure, look, they're going to keep it anyway, because sure, look, we couldn't be bothered in undoing it now that it's there. And who's bearing the price of that? It's the sex workers themselves. I mean, we had a situation which never happened before in 2019, where 2 Romanian sex workers working together for safety were arrested in their home, charged with keeping a brothel, jailed for 9 months, even though there was no client, hardly any money on the premises, and they got a 9-month prison sentence, and one of the women was pregnant. And obviously the chilling effect of that, the NGOs said then, had a huge terrorising effect. I'd say all of you know about our housing crisis, which is worse than the whole Europe's housing crisis, which is bad enough anyway. But can you imagine working in that environment with the danger that your landlord would find out that you are being charged with living on the earnings of prostitution? And when we were bringing in this legislation, we were told, no, that's only dealing with pimps and all. Don't be worrying, it's a great thing. It's the sex workers themselves who are being penalised by this. So look, this is a bad law, and we are the proof of that being a bad law. And the irony is that the Irish government itself has commissioned its review in 2019 on this. Where is it? We haven't seen it yet. So we actually believe that the reason why we haven't seen it is that they don't like what they're finding in it, and they actually don't know what to do with the outcome of that. And that's an enormously positive thing on that, because like all of the other speakers have said, we need to deal with the situation that leads people to take up sex work. We need to deal with all the labour rights, the human rights, and all of the stuff that other speakers have dealt with. So they're the issues if we want to improve the situation. So look, sadly, I have to be the bad example of Ireland to give you a bit of energy in turning the tide, but I don't think you need that, because to be honest, the positivity and energy here is exactly what we need to do to take the Belgian example and bring it into the mainstream in the rest of the European Union, and that is the way we will succeed in turning the tide back. So fair play to all of you, and thanks so much for the invite.
Okay, thanks to all 3 colleagues. We are an alliance here, and we'll be taking this issue forward. We have 14 minutes left because we really have to leave the room at strictly past. So we do have time for 2 or 3 quick questions. So who would like to take the floor? I'll take 2 or 3, but they have to be really quick. No questions.
No.
Gentleman in the middle.
Hello. I don't have a question, but I'm from Sweden, and I'm a full-service sex worker. And we know in Sweden for the past 23 years, we have had this very demoralizing and horrible laws that really violate the human rights of us in Sweden. And yeah, in our organization, we see like week by week different oppressions happening, and mothers fearing to lose their children, migrants being deported, racialized sex workers being attacked. And yeah, I want to urge you to speak to the Swedish MEPs directly and tell them that this is not okay, because it's happening and nobody's doing anything.
Thank you very much. I see another question here.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Katrin from ILGA Europe, and again, I know Evelyn was very sorry to leave, so just to say I'm still here. But it was more about, it was really, really encouraging also to hear from all the groups the great engagement on getting the position in the Parliament moving. We know it'll be hard, as you said. We know we'll need to get many more people into this room or get into many more different rooms. So the very specific question is, with the report coming up in FEM, would there not be an invitation to the Belgium Justice Minister to come and speak about the Belgium experience to the committee? Would there be an occasion to also invite ESWA into the room of the committee and have the actual experience of some sex workers being heard there as well, just to make the message heard by more of your colleagues directly from people who've been working on that? Thanks a lot.
Very good. I think we'll take up that suggestion immediately, and I think, echoing what Monika said, I think the dividing lines run crisscross through our political groups. But we'll propose this. And then push for it. And I think it's also very important to get, let's say, the feminists on board, because it's indeed, I mean, that let's say the bigots are not our allies, that we know. But on this particular topic, I'm always amazed at feminists, because I think it was Kali who said, you decide for us that we're victims without even having heard what we have to say. And I think in policy making and in politics, it's a basic rule that you consult the people concerned. And I therefore think that we should also propose in our resolution, but also to the European Commission, that any decisions that are taken shall not be taken before having heard the representatives. Because you cannot... But no, and I think we have to try and organize a meeting, maybe a smaller event with, for example, the women's lobby or the feminist organizations. And I find it quite irritating, because I too have some colleagues. We all have colleagues from Spain who, last time I organized the event, they were shouting at me and criticizing me. Wow. But then they're not here. Why are they not here? They should be talking with you, not about you. Yeah. But this is, again, it's a battle, but one that we will fight. And finally, I think we should also check out funding. I don't know if you already have applied for European funding, but
but I always reject that. Okay.
Well, we're going to look into that. I mean, we don't actually allocate funding, but yes, we will see to it that we get an appointment with the commissioner, maybe Commissioner Daly, and try and get support for funding, because that is very important. If you want to be politically organized, I mean political in the sense that you're an association, part of civil society, to be consulted, that's important. Okay, what I said has already triggered.
I have just very quick comment regarding funding, because I'm Irena from ESWA. I have been in touch with you for many times, but we have actually applied for funding under the SERF program for the operating grant. However, the justification we received was that the European Commission doesn't deal with the issue of prostitution, so we are not eligible actually, which is absolutely scandalous in my point of view.
No, this... The European Commission, when it comes to these issues, is really chicken. But we'll write a letter. We'll make an appointment with Commissioner Daly. We have very good connections. And Han, I'm sure he will be delighted knowing him. But we will follow this up. There was one more question there.
Thank you so much. And I just want to highlight that most feminists do support sex worker rights, and we are here. We are. I'm with Women Equals Men, the Dutch gender platform, and we are working with many others and with many of the sex worker groups here as well to try and build a better, more inclusive, sex worker friendly and inclusive feminist movement in Europe. And it would definitely help also to give less space always to necessarily the European Women's Lobby, which has been explicitly against sex work and prostitution, and to make sure that spaces are opened up for other feminist voices, also at European levels. So thanks for raising that, and yes, we are working on it, and much is still needed. And I just wanted to pose the question back as well, in terms of what can we all do across the countries here in Europe and beyond to support progress at European Parliament level? How can we be in support of the work that you have ahead of you?
I think, well, talk to the feminists. And yes, the European Women's Lobby may not have been our ally, but they will have to become our ally, because they are very influential. So we need to bring them on our side. So it's that kind of work, changing. Yes, well, I know, but you'll have to change people's mind ultimately, because people here will be voting, and they'll be approached by the other side as well. But I'm looking at the clock. I would actually like to give the floor to Kali and then Sabrina to conclude.
Can we read the last word?
Yeah, one last question, but we really have only 5 minutes left.
Yes.
Please.
Я хотела напомнить политикам, что принятие закона о декриминализации секс-работы – это важный, но это только бюрократический, формальный шаг. И обязательно нужно думать и разрабатывать меры по снижению стигматизации в отношении секс-работников.
I would like the politicians to be reminded that decriminalization of sex work is only a bureaucratic issue, and above that you should work on reducing the stigma on the sex work, and you should be aware of that decriminalization is not the one thing to do.
Возможно.
We have a problem with the mics. They keep switching off, so you have to keep an eye on it.
Yeah, and that probably is the job is that it's more difficult to achieve than just doing the decriminalization work, and because it involves more structures and more people.
Thank you.
Okay. Kali and then Sabrina.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. I completely. Does this work? Yeah. Okay. I completely agree that stigma it just creates such a dangerous situation for us. As I said before, stigma does kill in so many senses, and that's one of the biggest things that we should also be thinking about when we talk about decriminalization. Sabrina.
I want to thank you, Sophie, Cyrus, Monika, Clare, for being so brave in these times of alt-right rising again in Europe. That you are part of the resistance. I thank you so much for organizing this. Thank you so much for being on our side. And we know that the battle is long. In New Zealand, a country of 5 million people, and that it's an island, they took it 16 years to achieve it. Probably will be longer, but we will be here in front of them because we have always been the first line of defense against fascism, against pandemics, and against masculinism, even if the antis words say the contrary. But being a sex worker is, I think, is the most feminist thing that you can be, and. Yeah. And I leave the place like with some hope, that also waiting that this kind of encounters that continue, and that hopefully that we can. I would love to have here the Spanish MEPs, or maybe someone the Minister of Justice of Spain, Pilar Job, that she is one of the artificers of this law that is being proposed. So she's like very huge abolitionist. But I would like to have her here and to listen and to see them. But they are so coward that they don't have the ovaries to come and sit and listen, because all their structure will fall down and because of the evidence. So thank you very much. We're so grateful, and we will continue on fighting. Thank you so much.
Yes. Okay, thank you all very much. In conclusion, because I do think, yes, the road ahead of us will be long, but I don't think it will be 16 years. Because if you look back where we came from, we have already made progress. I mean, you know, when we organized our first event around this topic, I don't know how many years ago, as I said, we were a very, very small group of people, and there wouldn't have been a minister. Now there is an organization, there's a plan, we're going to secure funding, there is a minister who is pushing for it in the council, we have 4 political groups on the podium. I mean, this is becoming a political issue, and are we going to succeed immediately? Probably not. But we are progressing, you know, it is gathering momentum, and I have seen in other areas, also in Ireland, by the way, where all of a sudden a giant leap could be taken. It is possible, and I would like to thank everybody here, and I would like to thank Kali and Sabrina, because for me you are giants, I have to say, honestly. I think if you're talking about courage, Sabrina, I mean, you know, we are doing a job, but you guys are, and you people here, you are incredibly courageous. Because I remember when we first met, and now look where we are. Look where you are. You are an example. You're an inspiration to others. You're the real hero here, and I'm grateful to know you and take inspiration from you. We'll be fighting for you. I'm also, as Cyrus said, I mean, the level of emotion I felt in this meeting room, we rarely feel in this meeting room, but it's really impressive. Thank you all very much. This is the start of the journey. We will be meeting along the road, and I'm looking forward to our victories. Thank you all very much.
And everyone, is this working? We're going to take a picture outside with everyone. So maybe in 15 minutes, find us outside with the ESWA banner. And thank you so much.